What's going on, people? Welcome back to another episode of the FF Ballbusters podcast. My name is Will. Join me as my co-host Eric, and today we're going to talk about 6 players that should not, for the love of God, touch your fantasy football teams. Eric, how are you feeling today, dog?
I'm feeling great. I love that the tone has been set. Will is wearing the shades on. Honestly, bring the haters on because they're not going to be leaving us alone for this video.
Yeah, man, it's gonna get toxic just cause we're gonna be talking about players that people love. So you might as well just put the shades on. You guys aren't gonna hurt me, man. But hey, I love talking in the comments. If you guys want to comment down below, anything like that, we're always up for a discussion, and we're up for it.
Yeah, always up for it. But yeah, with that being said, if you guys could also hit that subscribe button, that would mean a ton to us. It's free and easy for you guys to do. We do have a goal to try to get to 500 subscribers before the start of the fantasy season. Might be a little bit lofty, but with your help, we can absolutely get there. So yeah, hit that subscribe button to be in the know for all of our upcoming videos that are going to get you prepared for your fantasy drafts.
Absolutely. So we're gonna let Eric kick it off. Eric, which one of these scrubs do you think shouldn't be on people's teams?
Bro, the number one leading scrub on my list is going to be Deebo Samuel. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 16 in the beginning of the fourth round. And that's just entirely too expensive for a player whose claim to fantasy fame came from just a crazy outlier efficiency season in 2021 that I don't think is repeatable at all. Um, and not only in terms of efficiency do I not think it's repeatable, but in terms of situation, the situation that Deebo had around him in 2021 is completely gone in 2023. San Francisco's starting running back that year was Elijah Mitchell. Brandon Ayuk was also in the doghouse for not taking blocking seriously enough, or whatever it was the Kyle Shanahan decided to do there. But fast forward to last year, where now CMC is the starting running back of the team, and Ayuk is back in the team's good graces, and is probably the best pure receiver that they have on the roster. That led Deebo to finish as the wide receiver 25 in points per game and the wide receiver 37 overall. Coming into 2023, I don't really see that situation improving either. CMC gets a full offseason to learn the playbook, so he's probably going to be even more involved. And Brandon Ayuk is getting rave reviews out of camp saying that he's the best that he's ever looked. I give Deebo credit. He's an amazing football player, and I love him as a talent, but I think he's going to be a very regrettable fantasy football pick in 2023.
I 100% agree. I think people are still clinging on to that 2021 season where Deebo played wide receiver and running back, and they think he's going to do that again on a team that brought in Christian McCaffrey. That doesn't make sense. And just looking at last year's numbers, it makes it. He did what he did. He just wasn't that guy. He's not that guy anymore because he just doesn't have that same opportunity. It's not Deebo's fault. Like we said, we love Deebo as a talent, as an athlete, but he's just not going to be able to propel himself forward like that because he's not going to be playing a wide receiver and running back position full time. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
With that being said, this is kind of a throwback to our other video. If you haven't checked it out yet, check out our 6 players that we feel like you should draft because it's sort of the opposite of this one. I've got DK Metcalf here. We felt like Tyler Lockett, someone you should draft. DK Metcalf, I feel like is somebody you should not draft. And you should draft Tyler Lockett because Tyler Lockett has outscored DK Metcalf on a per game basis each of the last 2 years, and they were 0.3 points apart in 2020. So obviously, something that worries me about both of these receivers is the fact that Jackson Smith and Jigba's there with the team. He's hurt now. He's got to get surgery. So, it's going to be a little bit of time before we do see JSN out there on the field. But with that being said, JSN was brought in mainly sort of to attack the middle of the field because that was something they struggled with last year. Something that Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf both really weren't getting done. Jackson Smith and Jigba greatly fills out that role for them, so he's able to do that. So it doesn't really take away from the two of them in that aspect. But with that being said, DK Metcalf should not really be taken in the first 40 picks like he's being taken. DK Metcalf scored 12 touchdowns 2 years ago, 10 touchdowns a year after. Last year recorded 6. And, you want to say there's going to be touchdown regression, stuff like that, but touchdowns are one of the most weird stats to try to predict and be predictive of. So it's not really something we can do. And it's a tough stat to predict, and it's going to come at the expense of him not having the same volume that he had last year as well, because we saw him also not perform with 141 targets. That number's only going to come down this year. So I am not optimistic about DK Metcalf going forward. I would much rather get a guy like Tyler Lockett who's going further back in drafts, who's just more of a value overall and is going to perform at either a higher or just about the same level.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And obviously, a lot of our fade throughout the offseason of DK Metcalf had a lot to do with JSN. But honestly, I expect his ADP to probably rise in the next couple of weeks now that we've seen his injury come about. And I'm still going to be fading him at those increased prices. I'd probably be fading him at his current price still. We saw even last year, without JSN in the picture, him finish as the wide receiver 27 in points per game, just nowhere near where he's currently being drafted. So, yeah, couldn't agree more with DK Metcalf being a fade for 2023. The number 2 guy on my list is going to be George Pickens. He's currently being drafted as the wide receiver 33, and he's going ahead of a lot of players that I just prefer way more than him in fantasy for this year. Guys like his own teammate, Deontay Johnson, who I think is vastly underrated. Jahan Dotson, who we just mentioned in another video, if you want to check that out for our must draft players. Marquise Hollywood Brown, Jordan Addison, Gabe Davis, Brandon Cooks, just to name a few of the guys that he's going ahead of that I'd probably prefer to him. I think he's fairly one dimensional in terms of his skill set. He's more of a deep threat. He's more of a contested catch guy. And that skill set doesn't really match with his quarterback, Kenny Pickett. Kenny Pickett succeeds more so in the short and intermediate areas of the field, in the middle of the field, not out towards the numbers. And that's where George Pickens does his best work. Yeah, and although he had a decent rookie season, it wasn't very productive for fantasy. He actually finished as the wide receiver 49 in points per game. And yeah, you come into year 2, you expect a sophomore bump, and I do expect that to be the case. But I don't know that it's going to get him all the way up to where he's currently being drafted, which is kind of where I think his ceiling is. Just in this offense, again, I don't believe in Kenny Pickett very much. I think there's a ton of mouths to feed, whether it be Deontay himself, Allen Robinson, Najee Harris, Jalen Warren, that are all going to need the ball in probably a low volume passing offense. I just don't really see the upside case for George Pickens this year.
No, I 100% agree. And unfortunately, on the fantasy stat sheet, amount of dogs inside of somebody is not something that actually counts towards points. George Pickens has just not really been a great wide receiver in the NFL. Personally, in my opinion, he's not a good separator. A lot of the clips we see out of minicamp and out of training camp are him catching contested catches, and that doesn't surprise me because he can't get away from DBs. So he's going to have to do that if he wants to make catches. So if you want to rely on a guy who, like you said, doesn't have that same target volume as a Deontay Johnson who's going later in the draft and is already kind of proven at this point to be a good NFL separator and talent at the wide receiver position, over a George Pickens, it's a meme pick. It really is kind of a meme pick. You just want NFL young boy on your team, which if that's what you want, I commend you. It's cool for a team name, but other than that, it's not great for fantasy.
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. But with that being said, I'm going to move on to the next person I got on my list. I've got Mr. Chris Godwin out of Tampa Bay. And before I start, I was on the Chris Godwin bandwagon since, the first year, who had left the team? Deshaun Jackson, I believe, left. And they were like, yeah, he's going to take a big step up in targets. And he did. And that was, sort of the breakout year for him. And I've been big for him since then. But he's also benefited from the fact that he's been on a team who has, at the very least, been top 3 in passing attempts in the league. So it's tough to say that, he is a great talent himself. He's out there. He has to catch at the end of the day. But he had Jameis Winston, who was number 1 in passing attempts that year. And, regardless of whatever, 30 for 30, blah, 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 he threw for 5,000 yards, which is still commendable, and 30 touchdowns. The next year he had Tom Brady, who was number 1 in passing attempts. The next year he had Tom Brady, who was number 2 in passing attempts, but I believe number 1 in passing yards. So it's just, he's been on these super high ceiling teams, these super high-powered offenses, and now he's going to Baker Mayfield, who I believe at the most he's thrown 28 passes per game. I believe last season he threw about 28 passes per game. Chris Godwin averaging 8 targets per game. Are you telling me Chris Godwin's going to have a 28% target share throughout the entire season and just be super efficient with that on this Buccaneers team? Because I think you're a liar. I think you're lying to yourself. I would much rather, if you want anybody in this Buccaneers offense, I would at least go for Mike Evans because I feel like he's going for somewhat around his price at the ADP drop that he's gone through. But Chris Godwin, I feel like, is being too heavily supported by the fact that people think he's going to catch a lot of passes and be a PPR monster like he's been in, the past. But the fact is he has Baker Mayfield at quarterback, who's only ever supported the top 18 wide receiver once, and that was Jarvis Landry in 2019.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I like that you bring up kind of the caveat with Mike Evans being a little bit more of a value because I do think that he's a reasonable value where he's going.
Hmm.
But yeah, just the style of play, the amount of targets that Chris Godwin would have to command in order to be a productive fantasy asset is just too much to expect, too much to predict coming into 2023. So I love that pick here for do not draft. The last guy here on my list is going to be Isaiah Pacheco. He has been sliding down draft boards a little bit, so I think people are starting to realize the error of their ways. But he's not low enough yet. He's still hovering right around that late 20s in terms of running back ADP, around guys like Rashad White, Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, Antonio Gibson, Brian Robinson, Khalil Herbert, all guys that I would prefer to Isaiah Pacheco right now in drafts. If we're talking about his production from last year, obviously this factors in the beginning of the season where he wasn't the lead back, but he finished as the wide receiver 46 in points per game. And this offseason just hasn't been positive for him. He's been out due to injury for basically the entirety of training camp and preseason. He still hasn't returned to action with the team. We've seen Clyde Edwards-Helaire getting even more involved and kind of taking back over that starting job as the two-down grinder, the goal line back, and stuff like that. And we've seen dating back to last year even and continuing into this year that Jerick McKinnon is going to be the third down guy, the guy that works in on receiving downs. And so I just don't know what role Isaiah Pacheco is going to have when he does come back. And we've seen, Jerick McKinnon is probably the best example of the type of production that you can expect out of the running back position for the Chiefs the past couple of years. And until the last, like 5 weeks of the season, he was irrelevant as well. So I just don't see there being a full season of solid production for any of the running backs on this team. And Isaiah Pacheco is currently the highest priced of the group. So I'm absolutely straying away as much as I can in 2023.
Yeah, it's hard to buy in on a Chiefs running back without like a real passing ceiling, stuff like that, because it's a very pass friendly offense, like you're saying. And there's no real running back since like Kareem Hunt who has found real success in this Chiefs offense. So to keep banking on them like this, I don't know too much about that one right there. I don't think it's too smart. Like you said, it's kind of a carousel back there. It's whoever's performing for that day, that's who they're using,
Right.
So I do like that. And this is probably one of the most controversial ones on the list. I will say that. So I am ready for the hate. I've got James Cook on this list. I've got James Cook. He's somebody who's been an off-season darling for a lot of people. You look up James Cook on YouTube right now. You go type him up in the search bar. You're going to see draft James Cook. You need James Cook. You need James Cook. I'm here to tell you, you really don't. And because the market's been very bullish on him, and I'm not sure why. I get he's a young running back in an elite offense. His brother's Dalvin Cook. But, further than that, I don't really see the upside. His ADP's risen and the hype's built up over the possibility that his role is going to expand this year. But if you look at last year, something I take into account is momentum going into the end of last year. And there wasn't really much momentum going into the end of last season to really take into account that this season's going to be a step up. He's still splitting time with Devin Singletary, who I believe if any other rookie running back steps into that offense, they're taking over that backfield last year, no matter what. But he wasn't able to from Devin Singletary, which is a pretty big red flag for me. But like last year when I said that Joe Mixon would be getting more involved in the passing game because the prior year he was getting more targets to end the season, James Cook kind of did the opposite. He had a 65% catch rate, and going into the playoffs, didn't get a single look from Josh Allen. Add this to the fact he's a smaller back on a team that just signed 2 running backs that can handle goal line duties in Damian Harris and Latavius Murray. And not to mention that Josh Allen is still there. The team said they're going to try to hold him back from running more, but at the same time, that's not going to magically change the player that Josh Allen is and his style of play. He's still going to be out there running the ball plenty. And that's not going to change the fact that he's not one of the best runners in the league. So in terms of James Cook, I just feel like there's a bigger cap on the ceiling that people are really trying to give credit for. I feel like there's just not that upside, especially when he's not going to be leading the team in goal line touches or red zone touches. I just feel like that's not a reality for James Cook. So that's going to greatly limit his touchdown upside. So I just really don't see where that ceiling is unless he just became an amazing elite receiver over this offseason. And he's got room to surprise me, but I just don't see it.
Even if he is, the volume's not going to be there. You don't see the ceiling because it doesn't exist. This one I'm in full agreement with. James Cook has never, not one time in his career throughout college or the pros, been a workhorse, been a volume rusher, even a volume receiver. He's always been a part-time player. I don't think he's ever had over 12 carries in a game in the history of his career. And yeah, I just don't expect that to be something that he magically adds to his game this year. Like you mentioned, he's not the goal line back. He's not the in between the 20s grinder. And he's the receiving back in an offense led by Josh Allen, who doesn't check down to running backs very often. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. I don't see the hype with James Cook. But yeah, I think that will probably wrap us up. Is there any honorable mentions that you want to talk about that you want to just throw some shade on before we get out of here?
Oh man, where do I start? Darnell Washington. I know nobody's really drafting him. I just really felt like I should say it. He's not good. He's going to be a great blocker out there, though. He's a great extra tackle to have on a team. Anybody else I got? Odell. I think he's going to do okay, but he's just not the same guy he was. I'm not expecting anything great. I'm not drafting Odell Beckham on any teams.
Yep.
Who else we got that I don't like?
Kadarius Toney. You want to talk about Kadarius
Oh,
Toney real
Kadarius
quick?
Toney with his rubber band hamstrings. He can't stay on the field, bro. But when he's out there, he's pretty decent. I can't take that away from him. It's just he's going to play the best 3 games out of 17 for you. So hopefully you pick the right weeks.
Yeah.
But
I love it. I love the energy. I love the vibes. Let's close this thing out, baby.
yeah, so with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you guys do all that great YouTube stuff. Hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you know when we drop all our latest videos. And check out our last video, which is the opposite of this one, the must draft or do draft list. Check that out. Hit that like button. It's absolutely free, and it's the best way to get our stuff out there to other people so they can check it out. And go ahead and hit up the comments, guys, because I know there's going to be comments. I know people are going to be upset. Let us know. Let's try to keep it civil, but, let's have a conversation down below, because maybe there's some eyes that can be open. Maybe my eyes need to be open. But, hey, I'm just talking the truth and how I see it. But, Eric, you got anything else for the people before we head out of here?
One, I completely agree. Come at us. Throw the comments at us. Let's see what you got. If you want to get into an even deeper conversation, hit the link in the description for the Discord. We can talk for hours. Whatever you want, let us know what's up. Also, check the other links in the description. We got a bunch of great sponsors down there. Whether it be Dynasty Owner, if you're looking for kind of a cool, unique Dynasty experience using real NFL salaries, we got a promo code there for you to get you 20% off. If you want to go over to League Winners Fantasy, we're partnered with them. We're excited to be working with them, and they also brought in a bunch of new content creators to get you guys ready for your fantasy draft, so go check them out. In conjunction with our partnership with them, we are also partnered with Underdog Fantasy, and you can use our promo code FFLW to get a 100% deposit match over there. We've done a bunch of mock drafts, a bunch of best ball drafts over on that platform. So if you want to do that with us to get prepared for the fantasy season, use our promo code and get yourself some money over there. And lastly, we have Do Numbers. If you're interested in some cool merch, apparel, hoodies, t-shirts, hats, any of that cool stuff, head over to Do Numbers and get yourself 15% off using our promo code linked in the description below. But with that being said, if you stuck with us all the way to the end, we very much appreciate you and we love you. And we will catch you in the next video. Peace.
Peace.